guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Britt, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you probably should because I talk about geeky things, and today we're going to do another episode review of Power Rangers Beast Morphers. This is Power Rangers Beast Morphers Season 2, Episode 16, Golden Opportunity. So, Nate! If you guys want to skip the full episode recap, you guys can click this timestamp right here. It'll take you to just my thoughts, but mind you, there will be spoilers probably on both ends of the spectrum here, and you will still get some of my thoughts, because how can I not interrupt with my thoughts whilst telling you how the episode is going? So, either way, whatever you want to do, if you want to skip the full episode recap, hit the timestamp and I'll see you guys all at my thoughts. So this episode opens up with Nate and Zoe waiting for Nate's parents, who, as we have learned in previous episodes, are traveling a lot. They don't see Nate a lot. They are overseas most of the time. And so they are waiting to meet Nate's parents as they're coming into town. They do actually get there. Steele comes in and introduces himself as obviously their son, because the whole situation of him being half robot, half human, but being genetically related to Nate makes them his parents as well. So he is making some really awkward requests. He wants Nate's mom to read him a bedtime story and wants Nate's dad to give him money for ice cream. Ben and Betty come by and take the luggage. Zoe and Steele leave because it's getting awkward. As Ben and Betty drive away, one of the suitcases falls off of the trailer, which I wasn't sure which direction this was gonna go, if that suitcase was just gonna be extremely important, or if they were gonna lose all the suitcases by the time they get to the hotel. Why would Ben and Betty have any kind of actual meaning to the story? So clearly we know which option that is. So Nate is hanging out with his parents, thinking that his parents were actually staying, that they weren't going anywhere anymore, they weren't going to travel anymore, and they could finally be a family again. This ends up actually not being the case. They end up taking a new assignment, but they won't be moving around as much. They'll be staying in one place, and they want Nate to go with. They're gonna be staying in Costa Rica for 2 whole years, and they want Nate to go with. So Nate is given a very strange dilemma, obviously. We return to Ben and Betty, who have indeed been losing luggage all the way to the hotel and has lost all of the luggage by the time they get to the hotel, because why make them important to the story? There's no reason. They're just there because they're funny. It's fine. Nate returns to the base and tells everybody about his opportunity, the opportunity to go and be with his parents, to stay with his parents and live with his parents and be a family again. But meaning this would need that he would need to leave Grid Battle Force and leave being a Power Ranger. And Steele and Zoe, the two people obviously closest to Nate, tell Nate this is a perfect opportunity and he shouldn't be giving up this opportunity to be with his family. So the Rangers all kind of get together and figure out how they can divvy up Nate's responsibilities at Grid Battle Force to try and make it as easy as possible for him to leave. And so they do that. And Nate feels better about leaving and is kind of convinced that this is the right thing for him to do. Nate begins training Steele on the DNA scanners to try and harvest DNA when Roxy attacks, and they all end up in a fight together. Nate calls for the others to come and help. He and Steele morph, they start fighting. The others come to help, and then turns out that Roxy just ends up stealing the DNA scanner, and they had, I think it was beetle DNA and flower DNA. So that becomes important later in the episode. As Nate is getting ready to leave, he and Zoe kind of have a moment where Zoe is honest and says that she's gonna miss him, but this is such a good opportunity for him. And Nate has a really cheesy line that is, "I used to think I was the luckiest guy alive. Now I know I am." Oh my god, so cheesy. Ben and Betty create this thing to assist in finding luggage, ends up blowing up in their faces, quite literally. Clothing everywhere because Ben and Betty are funny. So, there you go. Evox, Scrozzle, and the Robos they end up using the bug DNA, whatever bug it was, beetle DNA I think it was, and to create a new Robotron. And then Roxy decides to use the flower DNA, which they don't know what kind of DNA she's about to use, but it ends up being flower DNA, to power herself up. So she ends up with a cool little makeover. Nate is in the car leaving with his parents, and the Rangers are left to their own devices. Zoe is messing with something and screws something up, which then they have to go and fight the new Robotron and Roxy. So they leave to go fight, and they try to morph, and they can't because the morphers are not teleporting to them. So that's great. Well done, Zoe. As things are happening, the commander is communicating with the Rangers, and the Rangers are communicating back with the commander, and Nate is still wearing his communicator. So he hears all of this, and he tells his parents, I need to go and fix this thing first. I need to go and do this thing. It won't take long. So he calls Cruz. Cruz takes him back to the base, and they end up picking up the morphers and some weapons, and then going to the Rangers to give them said weapons and morphers. Nate decides he's gonna put up with one more fight, and they morph. Cruz is off to the side with the weapons in case they need it, and the Rangers are fighting. A Gigadrone ends up attacking, and Steel decides to go and fight that one on his own as the other 4 Rangers fight the Robotron and Roxy. Eventually the Robotron is destroyed, and Nate and Devin go to help Steel with the Gigadrone in their Zords, and they go and do that. Then they all return to help Zoe and Ravi fight off Roxy. Roxy ends up leaving, and of course they realize that they can do whatever it is they did again because they still have a DNA scanner. So I expect this to be something that happens again in the future. We don't know because, you know, continuity. It's not something Judlin is very well known to use, so. The Rangers finally tell Nate that they don't actually want him to leave, they want him to stay. And not only do they want him to stay, but they really need him to stay because none of them can handle anything going on in his lab. So Nate goes to the airport and tells his parents, I can't go. I can't do this. I am needed here. And the parents are very proud of Nate. They say their goodbyes to Nate and Steel, and the parents leave. And that's how the episode ends, with an invitation for them to go to Christmas. So that's where the episode ends, and so here are my thoughts. The things I thought about that were good was actually one big thing, and that was the story. This is actually a very overused story, especially in Power Rangers. The contemplation of will they go or will they stay? And in some cases, they do leave, you know, in the sense of like Kimberly, the first time Kimberly obviously didn't leave, but the second time she did. So it was definitely one of those things, it is definitely one of those things that generally tends to be obvious. We had a storyline like this with Kimberly where she stayed. We had a storyline like this with Justin when he stayed. So this storyline is definitely used, and used a lot. However, I feel like this particular episode was written well, and that's saying a lot because I really hate Judlin's team. But I will give props where props are properly given, and this was a well-written version of this story where they had the notion of character wants to leave, character is incredibly important to the team. The other characters explain how he can leave and explain that he's not as needed as he feels like he is, therefore a character can leave, but eventually decides not to. Right? So in a lot of other storylines like this, when they do that, when they do the very important character is leaving and the others are trying to convince them to leave by showing that they aren't as needed, the other characters tend to turn into jerks about it. And they're like, see, we don't need you, like in a really mean way. Where in this case, it wasn't mean. In this case, it was actually quite good. Like it was like, no, like here, look, I can do this, you know, Zoe can do this, Ravi can do this, Steel can do this, the commander can do this, like we can do this, it's okay. Like it was almost like a telling him, hey, with the team working together, we can make this work. We can make it work with you going off and doing the thing you need to do. So I feel like this episode was actually really well written where that's concerned. I feel like even though it was a very overused storyline, they wrote it in such a way that it didn't feel like the same story that we've seen over and over and over again. So I really do like that. Obviously, it was very obvious what was going to happen. Though, you know, there is always that possibility that at the end of Beast Morphers, he decides to go. And I'm also guessing Steel becomes a real boy. I digress. I know it's aired already in other countries. Please, those of you who have seen it, shh. But I mean, it's always a possibility that that is how it could end, where Nate knows his parents are going to be in a place and they're setting that up for the end of the season. Because obviously we're nearly to the end of the season. So, and it wasn't the Halloween episode that I was expecting it to be. So that was very odd. Anyway, but yeah, so there you go. What didn't I love about this episode? Okay, let's chat. Now, mind you, what I didn't love about this episode does not make me go, oh, worst episode ever. Oh, screw Jed Lynn. Oh, this just makes me lose all faith in Power Rangers. No. This just comes from a very, very picky me. A very, very picky director version of me. A very, very picky actor version of me. The acting, oh, there were just some weak moments. Now, mind you, the majority of this series, this season, has actually been quite good. The acting has actually been very impressive for non-union actors. And I've picked out, every time I felt like there was really a weak moment, I've picked out the weak moments in acting. And here is just another one. And what makes me very sad is it's two people that I actually really generally like the acting of. So it's really tough for me to say these things, but the acting was not fantastic. So the girl who plays Zoe, it was just very theatrical. The way she decided to act was just very, very theatrical. And mind you, if you are on stage, theatrical is good. Matter of fact, the way she was acting, actually reacting, but we'll talk about that in a second, the way that she was acting was actually quite good if she were not on camera. So acting on stage and acting on camera are two very, very different things. And I'm gonna get into this more in depth during an Acting 101. So if you haven't subscribed yet and you wanna know, subscribe and you will see in the year 2021. Anyway, because it's not coming this year. Sorry. But yeah, so acting on stage and acting on camera are two very, very wildly different things. And generally speaking, when you start acting, you start on stage because that just happens to be the most accessible form of acting, whether that is high school plays, high school musicals, or community theater. It tends to be the most accessible form of acting. It just so happened I got to start in voice, but then I moved to stage. And I was never great on stage. Like, I'm a fine actor. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a fine actor and I understand the difference. But I've always had a really hard time. I'm Norwegian. If you don't know about Norwegians, we tend to be a little bit more reserved. I do talk with my hands a lot, but only just because, one, I learned sign language when I was really, really young. I don't actually remember a ton of it. I remember some of it. But also, so I was taught from a very young age to talk with my hands, but also because I do this. And I did theater for so long, and so it has been taught for me to do this. But the one thing that I never really felt super comfortable doing was doing the big theatrical movements, the big theatrical acting. I understand how to do it, but I'm a better theater director than I am a theater actor. So I know where I lack. I can certainly do stage, not a problem. If I did stage now, I have a lot less shame these days. But I prefer camera, I prefer voice. That's just where I prefer. Anyway, moving on from that. So essentially when it comes to her acting specifically, and more, again, like I said, reaction, and I've got to say, very proud of her for reacting, because that's one thing that a lot of actors, especially green actors, tend to forget to do, is react. So if you essentially know that you are on frame, you're in the frame, but you are not really an active member of this particular moment, of this particular scene. It's a conversation between two other people or a couple of other people and you're kind of being quiet. You still have to react to the words they're saying. So with Zoe, obviously this was a very hard thing because she loves Nate. So it's very hard for her to be understanding that he wants to go to be with his family, and selfishly she wants him to stay, but she also understands that that's selfish. And this is what I would say to the actress too, because obviously we don't explore her feelings at all through the course of this episode, but we have to portray her feelings. So the way I would say it as a director is exactly that. You know that he wants to go, and you know that the best thing for him to have a happy life is to be with his parents. But selfishly, you want him to stay. You don't want him to go, but you know that that's selfish, and you know you can't hold him back. That's the emotion that I need you to have right now in this scene. So, as a director, that is what I would say to this actor. Because we need to portray a certain emotion. We need to portray her story, even though we're not exploring her story at all. So that way she needs to react. Now, on camera, you need to be a little more subtle. So it tends to be more like, so if I were Zoe, I would probably put my hands in my pockets or cross my arms and not look at the conversation, maybe close my eyes a little bit and just take a deep breath. Look really uncomfortable. And that would portray the same emotion that they were trying to do within that scene. Granted, being out of context, it's a little harder to portray that because the context isn't there. So, but that's essentially the way I would have kind of guided her, or just look uncomfortable. Just, he says it and you kind of have to look surprised, and then just kind of maybe just glance down at the floor like this a little bit and just subtlety. Subtlety speaks volumes on screen. So what does she do? But she goes, which if she were on stage would have been fantastic. On screen looks melodramatic and doesn't fit the medium. So the way she acted was really, really theatrical, and while that would have been great if this were a stage play, not so great with it being not a stage play, with it being a single camera show where there is no live audience. Like, at least in sitcoms I let it go and they're theatrical because they are generally sometimes in front of a live audience. And so they do have to do the theater thing as well as the on-screen thing, and they have to do a very interesting mix of the two things. In this case, it was just the camera, and it's just you and me watching her like this. So it felt melodramatic. So I just felt like, even though I applaud her for actually reacting, which again is something very hard for green actors to do, for them to remember, to actually cognitively think, instead of just being part of the scene and just looking, to actually react. So I do have to give her props. I have to give the director some props to be able to get her to react, or get her to remember to react. However, that being said, I can't give the director too many props because she still was very theatrical, and I would have called it and I would have said, hey, we need you to dial it back. Remember, we're on screen, we're not on stage. So the audience is very, very close. You don't need to do big reactions because the audience is right here. So dial it back just a little bit. Why don't you try something else? Let's give it another shot. Start back at 1. And so that's definitely the way that I would have directed that. And the director just didn't choose to do that. And I don't know necessarily if it was because the director just didn't think of it, or the director is also green, or they wanted her to overreact because they just wanted that mentality, but that's just not the way that it has been. So that would have been very inconsistent. I don't know. I can't decide how I feel about it because I don't know what the director's choices were. But the other actors never really, other than Ben and Betty, react in a big way like that. So it's very strange just for one character in one episode to do that. There was another part where when she messed everything up and she did that. And again, it was one of those things I'm like, you don't need to be that animated. on screen. Like, especially for her, like with the characters Ben and Betty, who are supposed to be cartoony, I expect it from them. I do expect the big theatrics from them. I expect the big animated facial features from them, facial expressions from them. I expect very large gestures from them, because that's how their characters were created. And while I don't like their characters, and we'll talk about that in a second, I still just, I expect it. So when I see it, I don't think it's funny. But I also don't go, oh, they're acting, oh, because it's the way the characters were conceived. So I can't say anything really bad about it. But with Zoe, it just felt very out of place, and I don't know, it felt very strange. There's so many other decisions they could have made with her reacting to her messing up. Anyway, let's talk about Nate. Okay. So I love this actor. I do. I follow him on Twitter. I'm very excited for Saved by the Bell, for the new Saved by the Bell, because he's gonna be in it, and I'm very excited about it because I actually really like his acting. I think he does a very good job. I really like this actor. So if you ever come across this video, please understand I like your acting. Because again, I generally like the acting in this season. There are just a few weak moments. And for this, it was literally one scene, and it was the very final scene when he was telling his parents that he couldn't go. Now, again, a difference between acting on stage and acting on camera. Two very, very different things. When you're on screen, you're supposed to have just a normal conversation. There really shouldn't be, I mean, Shatner made it famous to have the weird theatrical pauses, but he's also made fun of for it. So anyway, when you're on screen, you're supposed to have a conversation like you would in real life, because again, you're not having this barrier between you of this proscenium. I mean, not all stages are proscenium stages, but you have this proscenium, right? And again, we're going to talk about this in Acting 101 when I talk about like the specifics of stage acting and stages, because there's proscenium, there's thrust, and there's round. There's also other forms, but those are the three main ones. Anyway, I digress, because I always do. So you have this thing in between you and the audience, and generally the audience is really far away. So there's a lot of things that you have to do that are very different on stage that feel really weird when your normal life is just talking like this. And so when you're on stage and you have to portray that you're not wanting to give the news that you're giving, and you are very upset, and you're just sad, and you have to portray that with your voice, because you can't portray that with your face, because you have to make sure that people in the final row, 10, 20, 30 rows back, understand that you're very sad. So there are places where you have to put very awkward pauses, because that helps portray that emotion. You have to overly quiver your voice sometimes, because that's just the way it goes, because that is the only way that you can really portray your emotions when you're on stage. But it's really awkward on the camera. It's very awkward on the camera, and that probably felt like very overacting, didn't it? Nod. Yes, it did. It felt like I was overacting. If I were on stage, however, that would seem incredibly normal because of the way that stage acting works. And so when he was portraying those lines, that was what he was doing. When he was delivering those lines, that was what he was doing. He was doing this really awkward stage pause. And while, again, it works on stage, it doesn't necessarily work on camera. So just all in all, kind of weak moments in the acting, and it was really sad, and I really made my heart hurt a little bit, but also made me very frustrated, because as a director I wanted to jump through the screen and be like, guys, let's try it this way instead. So Hasbro, if you want a director, call me, because I know you just hired a new showrunner and we're all good there, it's fine. But if you want a new director, my phone lines are open. I'm willing to move to New Zealand for 9 months out of the year, as long as you can talk the government into allowing me to bring my geckos and my frog. So good luck on that. Anyway, let's talk about Ben and Betty. I don't like them. That's it, bye. Just kidding. It's just, especially this episode was just very frustrating. It was like, oh, we didn't give them any airtime the last few episodes, so let's just throw them in the episode. What are they gonna do? I don't care. Just write them in. There was no reason for them to be in the episode. Like, at least give them purpose. Like, at least just give them purpose. Ugh. That's all. That's all I've got. This episode definitely didn't frustrate me like a lot of other episodes in the past have, like a couple of episodes ago with the clip episode. Anyway, let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. And if you guys like this episode, let me know all the things you liked about it. If you didn't like this episode, let me know the things you didn't like about this episode. And I'll see you guys all next time. Bye. If you guys want to see my last Beast Morphers video, you guys can click right here. If you guys want to see all the Beast Morphers videos I've ever done, you can click right here. You can click here to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. Leave a comment down below, like this video if you liked it. Share it with a fellow Power Rangers fan, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.